Can you believe the shitstorm that is now swirling around the president? I mean, what do you make of this? As somebody who watches the media, I've never seen anything like this.
Well, at this point, I can believe it. I mean, I think that the floodgates have officially opened. I would say in the minutes after the debate ended, and we went live as soon as the debate ended. I mean, literally, the debate was actually still going on, and you said that Joe Biden, it's over. The nomination, it's his run in 2024 is over, whether he knows it or not. And I was actually a little surprised to hear that. I thought, well, but you were obviously completely right on, and it was a little bit surprising in those initial hours that the media really followed suit, right? I mean, we saw from CNN's John King, and then we saw reporting from CBS, and then it just started this snowball effect. And I really did think after that disastrous debate that the floodgates, we would start to see this leak, and then things would open up. Maybe it would be around this time that things would start to kind of galvanize around this message. But it was immediate, and I think it was because it was just so obvious. And I think there's other things at play. I think the corporate press, along with a lot of the elements of the Democratic establishment, realized that Joe Biden could not beat Donald Trump, and that is what led to this. But so at this point, I mean, we're just getting story after story, and I think that there is a real pressure campaign that's being waged through the media right now to get Joe Biden to at least step down as the nominee and potentially as the president. But at this point, yeah, I think it's a foregone conclusion. This is happening very fast, and I think we're going to see it over very soon.
It is a pile-on at the moment. And you know what's interesting? If you watch the language, as we all do very carefully, you're seeing new language, even not just from the press, but even from the president's advisors. So I asked the team to put together, this is a butted SOT, meaning butted sound on tape, of Karine Jean-Pierre and another White House representative, Ian Sams, and listen to, they're defending the president and what they've seen, but listen to how they phrase it. It's no longer being stated that he's fine as a matter of fact. We've shifted. See if you can hear the shift.
I would see this as what it was and what we believe it to be, which is it was a bad night. I have engagement with the president pretty regularly. What I see is a strong, resolute president who's always willing and able to work on behalf of the American people. We are acknowledging what people are seeing, but we do believe this was in this instance, it was a bad night. Look, we believe that this is a president that is able to continue to deliver and build on the unprecedented success that he's been able to do. That's what we believe. We believe, and he believes it.
When I deal with him, he's sharp, he's asking tough questions, and he's speaking, I think maybe most importantly, speaking passionately about what matters to him.
What's the common thread you heard in all those answers?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, they are. I think they're scrambling right now, and I think though, look, these are paid partisans, and this is also. I mean, we've seen this multiple times now over the course of the day. No matter it's Andrew Bates, who's like one of my least favorite spokespeople, because I mean, he literally is just lying at all times. They are not going to say that Joe Biden is thinking about leaving, is possibly going to leave, is acknowledging that there's real problems until he announces it. I mean, they are.
Well, and they're not going to say he's fine. Like they're no longer going to say he's 100% fine. And now it's been reduced to my opinion. We believe what I see. We do believe. Yeah. That's what we believe. When I deal with him, that's what Sams was saying. What I've seen, because all of that. I mean, I actually think there's some evidence in all of that couching. They're worried about congressional hearings. They could be worried about potential. Investigations, not charges. There's no criminality here, as far as I can tell. But they're putting the distance between them and the lies.
Maybe their next job. At this point, I mean, updating their LinkedIn and saying, I'm not going to go out on TV and fully lie. I've got to start to worry about what comes next, because so many of these people that are the closest advisors to Joe Biden, what happens to them? I mean, maybe they're part of the next Kamala Harris run, maybe not. I mean, at this point, it's kind of, rats jumping off the sinking ship here.
Yeah, they are jumping off. They are rats, and it's too late to save themselves. I hate to tell them, but couching it now in terms of your opinion is a day late and a dollar short. Okay, so there's, I would say off the top of my head, the two worst offenders when it comes to this 180 in the press coverage. Nothing to see here, move on. And now, it's deeply alarming and he must step down, are Morning Joe and the New York Times. Do you agree?
Yes, yes. And I think there's a distinction between those two. And I will say the New York Times distinction is most interesting to me because they were essentially the rest of the pack. I mean, I think that they were with the rest of the media up until Thursday night. And so they were undistinguishable from the rest. And now they have, to some level of credit, distinguish themselves from that Friday morning, the Daily podcast. And for people who are just sort of general consumers of news, when that Daily hit, I mean, that Daily is the biggest podcast in America by a wide margin. It is kind of sets the agenda for the left side of the country. That was a brutal episode for Joe Biden. That was, I believe, what led to some of these floodgates opening even beyond the New York Times. So I think the New York Times distinguishes themselves now as this real 180 because they were just as bad as everyone else before. Now they're leading the charge to get him out. They were just as bad as everyone else before. Now they're leading the charge to get him out.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see Morning Joe's culpability here?
Well, Morning Joe just feels just so gross. I mean, from Joe Scarborough to Mika Brzezinski, we know that they're the sycophants of the media when it comes to the Biden administration. They are talking to this audience of one, and they have been during this entire presidency. We know that Joe Biden loves Morning Joe. And by extension, I would say Morning Joe Scarborough loves Joe Biden.
I've said it for years now. He's cogent. Mm-hmm. But I undersold him when I said he was cogent. He's far beyond cogent. In fact, I think he's better than he's ever been. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it. Then I think it's critical that we ask the same questions about this man I love, respect. Can he run for president in 2024? In fact, as the New York Times said, he spent much of the night with his mouth agape and his eyes darting back and forth. He couldn't fact check anything Donald Trump said. And not only that, he missed one layup after another after another. Last night, he simply was not on the biggest debate stage ever. And I'll even use the word tragically. He tragically did not rise to the occasion last night.
Look, they are one of the worst offenders because they saw him. They knew him behind the scenes. Now, there's been a lot of reporting that even people like Tom Friedman, who, they've gotten they've sat down, they've had a drink, or not a drink, but they've had a meal with Joe Biden before. But okay, maybe that was once a year. Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, they knew, and they tried to cover it. They were very much, explicit, and they were complicit in this cover-up on the media side. And so now, you've got Mika coming out there after the weekend, who just literally was regurgitating the Democratic talking points, the Joe Biden talking points, just for 15 minutes to start the show. Obviously, Joe Scarborough wasn't there. And he's just almost crying and how he's so sad about it. He's trying a different tactic a little bit. But he was bad in the beginning, and it's just so embarrassing now.
Mm-hmm. I know. It was amazing to hear her be like, oh, cross-country trips and Hunter's conviction, and there was a state dinner, and so he's super tired. And I got real questions about these advisors that would put him out after, meanwhile, he'd been back stateside for 10 days. It's just such an obvious lie. I think she literally took their talking points and made a little memo for herself out of it and read it on the air. But meanwhile, Scarborough was missing in action, weirdly on vacation without his wife that day, right, after going out on the air that previous Friday and saying, he didn't say the words, I was wrong, but he said he can't do it. He's unable to prosecute the case against Donald Trump.
Megyn, they have a home studio in their main home during the summer. Right. I mean, this was like Joe Scarborough in the other room, not going out on air to do this.
Right, too ashamed. I really do wonder, what happened behind the scenes? I'd love to know. So the New York Times, I think it's actually rather amazing, the amount of chutzpah that they are showing in now condemning him as old and infirm and incapable, given how they dismissed the videos showing us all of that as cheap fakes just weeks ago. Now, his cognitive problems have been long in the making. You know, you and I, we reminded the audience that back in 2022, we did an episode. It was an early episode for our show doing a deep dive in his cognitive abilities. And we talked behind the scenes about, is this appropriate? You know, we don't want to diagnose somebody who we haven't actually seen. That's not right. But this is a news story. And we put on Dr. Bredesen, who's an expert in brain health. Like we took it very seriously back then, but almost nobody was touching it back then.
And that was specifically why we did it. You know, this is a little peek behind the curtain here, but you and I have these conversations and say, what is true and what are people not saying? What is the story that's important, that is absolutely, you know, based in truth, but that people are afraid to talk about, that people are not doing? And you know, Biden's cognitive fitness and his cognitive decline was certainly one of them. And so we said, well, let's take it seriously. We had on people from the left and right, Rich Lowry and Ryan Grimm. We had on Dr. Bredesen, a specialist in brain health. Let's take it seriously. Let's actually do this because it's important. And obviously, we've been seeing this for years. And there has been a lot of reporting in the last few days that the last 6 to 9 months have gotten significantly worse. I think we have seen some evidence of that. But it certainly didn't start Thursday night. I think that's obvious to anyone who's been paying even a little bit of attention to what's going on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the New York Times actually was like, oh, in the past 3 weeks, it's gotten really bad. Okay. All right.
Right,
sure. Right. Well, after we issued our earlier publications defending all those moments. So let's talk about some of those moments because it's really telling. Okay. So the team has put together some great information for us both to digest here. Now, the New York Times, they talked about, this is an article from 621, how misleading videos are trailing Biden as he battles age doubts. Misleading. They say, look, he's got many adversaries in this year's election. And then there is the distorted online version of himself, a product of often misleading videos. And they go on to say, oh, the conservative news outlets, the RNC, Trump team, they're circulating videos of him that lack important context. They've twisted mundane moments to paint him in an unflattering light. The New York Times review of these videos found that some scenes were cut short and taken out of context. Other clips were cropped in a way that omitted crucial details. Some of the videos of Mr. Biden circulating during this year's campaign are clearly manipulated to make him look old and confused. Okay, so like what? New York Times, walk us through it. This is what they said on June 21st about, D-Day. This is about the D-Day event in France. They're talking about how he walked out and he didn't stay long enough. Macron was left there to greet all the veterans. And the conservatives did point this out and say he screwed it up and Joe Biden had to take him out. So this is what they report on June 21. He was escorted out of an event by his wife, Jill Biden, when President Emmanuel Macron of France stayed behind to greet veterans. But then the point the Times wants you to know is a longer video showed Mr. Biden greeting veterans before his exit and then walking out with Dr. Jill. Okay, so they're basically saying he greeted the veterans. He just did it before his exit, so calm down. Now, on July 2nd, there was an awkward moment when Mr. Macron made sure the president got safely down the ramp. Oh, it was awkward? Why didn't you tell us that before? And then came back up to shake all the veterans' hands. Mr. Biden had been expected to stay for the handshakes. Why didn't you tell us that before? You didn't tell us that. You tried to dismiss it like it was nothing. He seemed confused at points during the D-Day anniversary ceremony in France on June 2nd. None of that was in the original "Don't believe the cheap fakes" reporting, Steve.
The entire cheap fake narrative, and that is truly what it was this crafted artificial narrative that was created to try to spin this video and several others, which I know we're going to talk about. And it obviously all blew up on Thursday night, but it wouldn't have if Joe Biden had even a C- debate. I mean, it literally took a failing grade, just a brutally medically obvious debate to blow this completely out the window. And look, the New York Times is not alone in how they framed these videos, but they are obviously a very important voice, as we've talked about. And why did this happen, right? Why did they do this? Why did they go down this path? And I think it's important to understand that there is a social penalty, this kind of intellectual blackmail that happens. When I interviewed Olivia Nuzzi for my book last year, she had talked about how covering the Trump administration, there was no social penalty if you went after them, if you reported things. With the Biden administration, it's the opposite. You have to have at least a little bit of spine to cover things in a way that you know is going to get you blowback from your inner circle, whether it's within friends, whether it's on social media, on X. And so few reporters are willing to do that. So they're just more than happy to, whether it's willful ignorance or whether it's sort of this obvious bias, but whatever the reason, they are more than happy to go along with this narrative that is clearly false for anyone who isn't totally politically blinded by what's happening in front of their eyes.
Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.